you just said there was really, really resonated with me. It really hit me, actually. The idea that you will cry, it will happen, but that tiny smile that you experience, even through a loss, even through grief, you're fortunate that you got to have that experience that allowed you to find that smile at that time. And I feel like you've been through so many obstacles in your life, but I'd love to know what you see as the relationship between vulnerability and strength, especially as a leader, because I think leaders have an overarching pressure to display strength in a certain way. I'll give you an example. I coach several CEOs and individuals, athletes and others. And one of the CEOs who leads a large organization called me a few months ago, and we were working through some things together. And at one point I said to them, I said, it would be really wonderful for you to tell your teams that you lead what you've been going through and growing through. And they said, Jay, I don't know if I can tell them. I don't know if I can tell them. And I said, why? And they said, well, because it will look like I'm weak. And I said to them, well, no, you being vulnerable and sharing your growth is the greatest strength. That's not a weakness. But that was new because so many leaders feel they have to portray a certain type of strength. But even today, I can see there's a grace in the way you're sharing.
Well, I have a rule that I thought that everybody in my staff knew, because I had, when I was a senator for a long time, at one point, I don't know how they measured it, but I had the same staff longest than anybody in the Senate at the time. For example, we were doing a very, very important Supreme Court hearing. I was chairman of the Judiciary Committee. And we worked on it very hard and did all the research and, anyway. And there was one young man who people say was invaluable because he's the guy who knew all the detail about certain things. And I found out that he was having trouble at home. And I said, I want you to go home. Don't come to the hearing. He said, I can't. Go home. Go home. And you know why? Because I would go home. I have 1,000 bosses, but only one, me, no one. And so I know when I had crises at home, raising the boys, I went home. I don't know how many years ago it was, but in this job, and as vice president, another person was having some trouble at home. And I found out, but I said, go home. And they said, no, I can't. I said, if you don't go home, I'm going to fire you. Go home. Your relationship is a hell of a lot more important than whatever you're doing for me. So that's a rule we have, not a joke. Absolutely not. And you never have to tell me why. All you got to say is, I'm not convenient. I take you at your word. If it turns out you're playing games with me, I'll learn, but I know you too well. Take the time, because you're not going to be any better than your relationship. Mm. And it's a little bit what you were just talking about. And, I think you'd have to ask my staff. I don't know, but I think as long as they know, that's more important than doing whatever specific thing you're doing at that moment for me.
How do you apply that rule when it feels like what they are working on, that specific moment, seems obviously to be the most important thing in the world? How do you...
Well, because there's only one advantage of getting older. You've had a lot of experience, and you can apply a little bit of wisdom. It's really critical.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's a selfish aspect to it, because when you have a problem with someone you love or some problem, you got to deal with it.
Yeah, and you can't even perform as well.
Exactly right.
Yeah, absolutely.